Hi everyone. This is our next lesson and lecture on talk about stress. And a lot of times we look at stress management, and we often figure in our minds, how do we cope with stress? Now we know that we deal with stress every day, whether it be stress from family, whether it be stress from work, whether it be stress from watching the news, whether it be stress from internal and external functions that happen in our lives. Everything has an amount of stress, and stress is not necessarily relegated to people based on income or race. Everyone has some type of stress, and all of us have uh, defined strategies to mitigate this stress. And so stress has a lot of effect on us, both short term, both long term. It has features and functions that can affect both our bodies and our minds. But stress doesn't cause disease, but it can trigger, those hormones or those perceptions that break our body systems down. And so chronic stress can sometimes undermine our ability to deal with our day-to-day functions and life. And it leads us sometimes back to what we talked about in a previous section, where we talked about a lot of those mental disorders and how does it affect us. So it's good to know that all stress is not bad, but how do we mitigate it? How do we work with it? And so we have to figure out, what causes, this stress. We live in the demands of our lives every day. And so in these demands come with stress. I face stress every day in my regular job. I face stress, every day in managing, you know, uh, at a bank. I look at the stress that I face in serving as an interim president. I look at the stress I face serving as a professor. And so we can either do two things with this stress. One, we have to know, what does it cause? It gives us a lot of alarm, knowing that it lowers our resistance to certain things when it comes to activities, or it might perk up our antennas. The other thing is resistance. We the body always fights to maintain homeostasis. When you're sick, your body raises its temperature to try to get well. When you're cold, your body closes its pores so you can maintain heat. When you're hot, your pores open so you sweat. So your body looks at this resistance and try to find ways to get back to that balance. And the last thing is just exhaustion. You get so heavily stressed and worked up that you basically just need to collapse. And so that is where you have a lot of people, when that collapse takes place, often leads to what? Mental breakdowns, or some type of mental phobia, because of the stress of the response and how the body responds to it. So when we look at our physical health, people that are stressed, we think about what? Heart attacks. We look at strokes. We look at high blood pressure. We look at people who gain weight. We look at people who lose weight. Well, there's so many different things. There's not just one way to think about it or to settle it. And it's not stress that kills you, but we do know that it is a good underminer. It could be a good what we call it, a good indicator, of what might cause this phenomenon to occur. So what do we look at? This is something called the diathesis stress model. And this is psychological theory that explains behavior to see that it's nature and nurture, biological and your experiences. This is what creates your stress profile. What are you born with, and how do you deal with it in the environment? And so everybody looks at stress and handles stress different based on what? Their biology and their environment. And so that's why, poor people can look at rich people and say, well, rich people don't experience stress. Rich people can look at poor people and have the same philosophy. People in the middle look at both and say, you know what? I don't know what you're talking about. We are the ones that obviously have the most stress than either one of these groups. And so why do you even bother to complain? That is the whole effect of what we look at when it comes to stress. Now, stress has, agents with your heart, and they look at, stress and developing bad habits. You look at stress and you worry about, how do these things play a role in affecting you in your day-to-day life. But these are things that we often do not look at. But we do know that people who have higher rates of stress don't exercise as much. They may pick up more bad habits as smoking and drinking, which leads to an increased rate or risk of, having heart attacks or even strokes. For most people that are stressed, some people overeat when they're stressed. Some people don't eat when they're stressed. And so stress also breaks down your immune system. So people that are stressed feel sicker more, or they're more susceptible to getting certain, diseases that a healthy person normally would not get. Some people have traumatic stress that affect their sleep patterns and gives them headaches and tightness in their muscles and upset stomachs and not being able to sleep. And you notice the people that sometimes they get a little itchy or they get a little nervous, over anxious. They lose drives, they lose appetites. And so even if you have hives or skin condition, you got people that, they get stressed out and all of a sudden they start getting hives and, they start breaking out. All of these things are stress, and they are stress indicators that can lead to other problems if it is not addressed in a timely manner. And so this is all a part of what we look at as we look at our health and we look at our bodies and we look at, our activity and our exercise, and basically looking at how do we maintain, healthful living. How do we maintain this fitness in response to health and wellness? And so one of these things is just realizing that, we have all these stressful indicators. And even as a student, we know that being a student, as you listen to this, it is stressful because, we have tuition, we have multiple assignments, even in this class, you've got lectures and homework and all these other rigors of being a student. But at the same time, you have a regular life that you also must live. And so these are also stressors. And so when we look at students and stressors, we look at this from 5 standpoints. One is your academics. You're in school to get good grades. You're in school to study and prepare. You also have family relationships. Even though you're in school, you might have a family, that you have to fix dinner for, or sometimes they might get sick, or you got to take care of kids or grandkids or nieces or nephews. All of these things play a role in student stress. Finances, don't have to say anymore. Daily hassles, going back to that familiar relationship. We still have to live life. We've got to travel, and we've got to do other things in the scope of also competing and performing in our classes. And then we have our social outlets, which is tied again to that familiar and daily hassle, because we do have other people that we must interact with every step of the way. So yes, it does create that stress. So what do we do? How do we cope with this thing? And coping with stress also comes from uh, our genders, our breeds. We're just genetically different when it comes to dealing with stress. A lot of times most males take stress very lightly. Most women take stress very more harshly because they're more focus driven. Where, most men in stress fall back towards more habits like drinking and smoking. So it creates all of these different ways that we handle stress. And so a part of our assignment this week was to look at physical activity. Last week we talked about how exercise is helpful to us. But still, how do we deal with those stressors? How do we manage stress? Well, sometimes you just got to talk about it. It's like I sit down in this chair and I'm talking to you and delivering this lecture. Sometimes we just have to talk about what affects us. The other thing is we have to have a plan and strive for balance. A lot of what we do, a lot of times, is because we don't have personal balance. And an imbalanced life leads to an imbalanced mental health, and to an imbalanced physical health, to an imbalance in our spiritual health, which then pushes us out of being what? Healthy. Remember that health is just not the absence of disease. It's looking at the physical, the spiritual, the mental, every component. Just not the absence of disease when it comes to health. So sometimes you just got to put your feet up and take a break. Sometimes you got to take that 10 minutes or 15 minutes just to de-stress your day. It's the advice I give to all of my friends and people that I care about. That in every day, in every way, take 10 minutes to appreciate your day. In every way, some way, enjoy 10 minutes of your day. I want that to be your model that you live by. In any way, some way, enjoy 10 minutes of your day. Focus on something that you like to do. Whether it's reading, whether it's knitting, whether it's artwork, whether it's music, whether it's video games, whatever it is, find that quiet space where you can have that break. And the other important thing is, Jerry Springer, at the end of every show, when he'd do his monologue, he'd always tell you to take care of yourself. Well, that's a good strategy for coping with traumatic experiences. You got to learn how to take care of yourself. How do you engage in healthy behaviors that increase your ability to cope? And we're going to talk about that one a little bit further. And the fifth thing that I find most enjoyable is, how do you alleviate stress? Help someone else. Have a volunteer spirit. Get out into your community. Share your experiences. This is what helps you cope and manage your stress. And so, focus, reconstruct, self-improve, self-compassion. These are things where you cannot go wrong if you're wanting to manage and learning how to mitigate your stress. So some people write, some people keep journals, and they write about their experiences. They put them on paper because they feel like the more they write, the better they feel. But no matter what you do, find those strategies, find those techniques. Some people look at meditation, where you reach back and you relax for 15 or 20 minutes. Some people do yoga. Some people will ride a bike or do something that will give them a lot more of meditative type of thought. But one thing that also you can look at to help mitigate it is have an optimistic attitude. Mind over matter. Self-efficacy. Know that you are in control of your life. It reminds me of the poem Invictus by William Ernest Hensley. And it talked about, no matter how straight the gate, no matter how punishments the scroll, I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. These are the things that you look at. And I might have repeated that wrong, but that's the concept that you might understand. We are the masters of our fate. We are the captains of our souls. We guide that ship. And we have to understand what are those things on the inside and outsides of us that help us. Our personal relationships, support systems, your loved ones, your family, your support, your spirituality, which we talked about last week. How do you cope? But one important thing that we also look at when it comes to stress is managing your time. Developing a plan, scheduling your time well, having a system, and always, once again, focusing on what you can do. What are the tasks that you're trying to accomplish? And focus on those things. When you start to do that and you don't worry so much about tomorrow and you worry more about today, because you can't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow's not here. You can't worry about yesterday. Yesterday is gone. You only have today. And, it's like that song from Boyz II Men when they talk about yesterday. All my troubles seem so far away. But you can't focus on yesterday, because when they focused on yesterday, they felt like those problems are here to stay. And they want to go back to yesterday. But you can't. You've got to focus on your present and your present strength of mind. So, exercise, sleep. We need at least 7 hours, 8 hours of sleep a night. A healthy body, healthy mind. Exercise. We should at least get a good 30 minutes of exercise in every day. Healthy body, healthy mind. And so a lot of times people say, well, I don't have time to exercise. I don't have time to, focus in on these things. But I tell you, you focus on things that you deem to be important. And so sometimes you can't make excuses for what you want to see. You have to be the change that you want to see. And that is why stress becomes so sometimes overwhelming, because we don't know how to handle that change. But we want to either have the incomplete or have an excuse about why that stress becomes so overloading to us as individuals. So, there are 3 things. Get real, get ready, get going. So, we have to get real. Understand this is the life that we're living, and we must deal with it. We have to get ready. That is our planning and how do we plan to progress in our goals. But most importantly, you got to get going. This is where the rubber hits the road, where you can't give up, where you can't give in. because you know that you must be strong. And so, yes, stress is real. You know, that emotional stress, that physical stress, that spiritual stress, that stress is real. And we have to acknowledge it in order to move on. If not, those psychological breaks are real. And it does wear you down. It makes you put off things. It makes you procrastinate. It makes you not want to handle those tough decisions. And so there's no easy way out. It's basically fighting and hitting those problems head on and finding solutions to them. So personal stress is not necessarily what I think you should do. It's developing the tool that fits you. Remember that self-efficacy, knowing what you can control to help yourself. And so this is a part of what we do in our everyday lives. We find ways to find mechanisms. Either we develop them, we recreate them, or someone gives us something that can help us cope with our stressors. And so when we begin to work on those stressors, we still live by this one philosophy, that it is up to me. You know, that personal stress management. The first word says it all, personal. It's not group stress management. It's not worldwide stress management. It's personal. So you find out what works for you. That is what makes you fit and well and whole as an individual. And so if I can't leave you with anything from this lecture, is in any way, some way, enjoy 10 minutes of your day. That is stress management 101. So hopefully this lecture will help you and augment as you study chapter 2 in your book, answer those discussion questions, and really just show you how do we, really manage, the stress that we have in our lives. Do we use it to hurt us, or do we use it to help us? So it's all up to us on how we look at those situations. But no matter what, we have to get real, get ready, get going, and then lock in those choices. When you do that, it will help you in the long run to be the best person that you can be. See you next time.